Hey guys, Chad Hoover, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to tell you about the new Omega Rod Holder from YakAttack. All right, so the reason YakAttack named this rod holder the Omega Rod Holder is because it's the last rod holder you'll ever need, so let me tell you why. First and foremost, this rod holder solves a problem that has been an age-old debate about rod holders. Most rod holders that work with a track-based mount tighten up in the right direction, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So if you've got your rod on the left side of the boat and a fish hits it and it turns, it could loosen up your rod holder. And folks have always been worried about whether that could come out of a top-loading track or whether it can slide out of the back of the track and you lose your rod, you lose your reel, you lose your rod holder, and you lose your fish, and then you got a fish that's dragging a rod and rod holder around the ocean or the lake, and that's not a good thing. So here's how this thing works. So basically the base is a separate unit and it works with the T-bolt, the YakAttack T-bolt, the one that started it all. And then there's these little teeth in here that align in the tracks that keep the base from rotating. So what you do is you simply slide it down into the track, you tighten this knob down, and you position the base where you like it. Now when you're tightening it down, I offset the teeth in the direction that the rod holder is going to turn, and that really tightens that base up. Give it one more good quarter turn. I don't have to over tighten it. I want it just tight enough that I can move it by hand if I need to. So then you take the rod holder and all you do is make sure that your capture's open, drop it down in there, flip it over, and it locks in place. What's cool about this thing is it is one-handed rotation operation. You simply press the button, rotate the rod holder, and again, I'm going to show it to you from this side. Press the button, it raises the rod holder up, and then you rotate it to where you want to lock it, push it back down, and it locks in place. Now, what I really like about this rod holder is I've used rod holders in the past where if I loosen them up, the entire rod holder collapses. What's great about this rod holder is that doesn't happen. I loosen it up and then I can position it where I want it, change configurations, change orientation, and then give these little knobs a couple of turns, and then it's locked in place and it's not going anywhere. Want to adjust it again, I give them 2 turns to unlock them, push out on them, lock them in place. Now, here's a really cool thing about this. I'm a big fan of your vertical tube style or rocket launcher style rod holders, but when you use those type in conditions where you don't have to worry about the rod getting pulled out, you have to go to a different rod holder if you want to convert to one where your rod could get pulled out. What's cool about this rod holder is I can orient it vertically. I can make it perfectly vertical or tiny bit of cant to it, lock the collar in place, and then put that collar in the back or lock the collar in place in the front. Either way, drop that rod into it and it acts just like a tube style or rocket launcher style rod holder. That's great because the reel can face in the backwards direction and lock into that little groove, or you can rotate it around and your trigger will lock so that it keeps your rod right where you need it when you need it. Now, if you don't like that setup or that orientation, again, you simply loosen it up. Let's say you're fishing a river and you want a more horizontal orientation. Lock that back in place, take your rod, lock that back in place, take your rod, pop it out, slide it down to where the reel is in the reel cradle position, and now it's secure. You can either leave it in that position, and it's really going to be difficult for that rod to get pulled out, especially with the casting or spinning reel, and in most cases even a fly reel, which this rod holder will accommodate all 3 types. But when you lock it in place, it's definitely not going anywhere. So for most situations, if you're paddling in the river and you're worried about a tree limb catching it and pulling it out, that's not going to happen because the reel is going to prevent that. But if you're fighting a big fish and you want that extra measure of security, you just rotate the lock and collar and it's not going anywhere. There's no way that it's getting pulled out. You're going to save your rod, save the rod holder, and you're going to land the fish. So guys, that's the Omega Rod Holder from YakAttack. Pretty straightforward. Again, this thing will accommodate casting rods and really big casting rods. So if you're fishing saltwater, it works. It'll also accommodate spinning rods. If you look here, what's cool about this thing is you can roll your reel to the left side, the right side, depending on how you're looking at it. You can move it up and lock it in place. Again, you can lock the collar to lock your spinning rods in place. You can bring it back. And again, you don't have to change the orientation of the rod holder to change the orientation of the reel. So if this rod holder is over there and you want the reel to the outside, you can put one on the outside and one on the outside to leave you room for your black pack or your gear. And again, it's just really configurable and reconfigurable. It even goes low to almost a perfectly horizontal orientation, and when it's in that horizontal orientation, you can still use it. So if I'm running a river, I really like to have this set up. If I'm doing a flipping and pitching technique or frog fishing where I want a throwback lure, I'll set one up front, put it on top of my drop pod, and I'll have that throwback rod sitting there ready to go. And another cool thing I like to do with this is put one up front on the track, rotate it up, tighten it down, and my paddle can go into the paddle keeper and lay in that groove, and it puts it right there at the ready. So again, this is the Omega Rod Holder from YakAttack, the last rod holder you'll ever need.